This is the Pharmacy Future Leaders Podcast, part of the Pharmacy Podcast Network.
Pharmacy Future Leaders is a podcast dedicated to pharmacy students by pharmacy students who are committed to making an impact on our healthcare system and providing optimal patient care as innovative and leading pharmacists. As Pharmacy Future Leaders, we dedicated our lifetime of service to others through the profession of pharmacy.
We will consider the welfare of humanity and relief of suffering as our primary concerns as we apply our knowledge, experience, and skills to the best of our ability to assure optimal outcomes for our patients.
And now, here are your hosts and Pharmacy Future Leaders.
Welcome to the Pharmacy Podcast Network. I'm your host, Geily Ward for Pharmacy Future Leaders. Today, we welcome to the show Travis Hornsby, Chief Planner at Student Loan Planner, a former bond trader who used his skills to create models for how to save money while paying back student debt. Travis, welcome to the show.
Thanks so much for having me, Geily.
So to start off, Travis, can you share with our listeners a little bit about yourself and how you got started with the creation of Student Loan Planner?
Sure, be happy to. So my wife had a bunch of student loans for med school, not pharmacy school, but you know, it's really stressful no matter what school it is, right? And so she was kind of ignoring it, not really thinking about it when we met. And so we started dating, we had the money talk, and I was like, oh my gosh, you have how much of student loans? And so I went to undergrad with nothing because I got super lucky. You know, I got a scholarship undergrad in where I went in Florida at University of Florida was really cheap. You know, it's like almost free because it's just, we just got really lucky there. And so we had all the student debt in our lives now because I wanted to marry my now wife. And I was thinking, well, how the heck do we get rid of this? Like, what's the best way? And so I was kind of thinking it was just kind of like any debt, right? Like you kind of talk to your parents about debt. You talk to like friends, you listen to shows like maybe like Dave Ramsey or Susie Orman, you know, if you're ever like watching CNBC with your parents and like, you sit on that show for a little bit. So they say, pay it all off. That's what they always say. But the problem is student loans are so different from every other kind of debt. There's income-based options, there's forgiveness options, and if you have $10,000 in a credit card, nobody's going to be forgiving that. You need to buckle down and pay it off, right?
Right, absolutely.
But if you have $300,000 or $200,000 of loans from pharmacy school, there's a lot more options than that. And if you have, 6 figures of debt for medical school, there's a lot more options for that. So basically what I did is I used the skills that I developed trading for one of the world's larger investment companies, billions of dollars in bonds. I took those Excel skills that I had developed in that job. I was pretty good at programming because of that job for Excel specifically. And I just built an Excel model is all I did for my wife. And then she was like, this is pretty good. You should share this. And so I posted it online and then people started downloading it a ton. And I realized that, wow, this is something that people really need. And so then I said that I did student loan consulting part-time and then a bunch of people demanded it. So then I realized, well, okay, maybe I should do this as my full-time thing. So I gradually made it my full-time focus. And, I launched it kind of officially in October 2016. And one thing's led to another. Friends have told friends, and now we've had about 1,200 clients, and we've advised about $340 million of student debt as I record the podcast with you today.
Wow, that's impressive and very needed. As a third-year student, I've just recently started looking into my debt because I was so afraid to look at it before, and it was definitely a wake-up call when I saw those trailing zeros. It's a lot of money, and you really have no idea when you're walking in. You're just excited that you got accepted to your, the program of your dreams, and you just think, okay, I'll pay it off when I'm done. And it's so scary that the interest, it keeps building up. You can end up with $200,000, but if you keep putting it off, that can double and triple and keep going, and you'll never finish paying it off. And Forbes magazine reports that there's more than 44 million borrowers that collectively owe $1.5 trillion in student loan debt in the United States. That number is ridiculous. Travis, what are your thoughts on the student debt crisis?
Well, it's bad and it's getting worse, and there's no end in sight. So, for example, I think the average pharmacist debt has just absolutely exploded in the past 10 years. If you look at the AACP's graduating student survey, you can kind of tell that the average debt, I think the last number that I saw was up to about 166,000, I want to say, was the average pharmacist debt for people all pharmacists who graduate with debt. And actually, our internal numbers with Student Loan Planner have shown our average client has about 217,000 of debt from pharmacy school. And what I think is happening is a lot of times, Haley, you're somebody who's like prepared and really kind of thinking about the future, and so you're logging into your account balance to see what you owe. A lot of people don't do that, and so these surveys are actually based off of people's self-reported estimates of what they're going to graduate with. And a lot of times, what I find is people underestimate the amount of debt that they actually graduate with.
Absolutely.
And so, actually, I think that the statements from the AACP could actually even be understating the true amount of the debt out there, which is really kind of terrifying if you think about it, because, pharmacists are, the typical income is 110 to 130 if you're full-time in a kind of a retail setting, maybe less if you're in a hospital setting, and then obviously much less if you do a residency for a couple of years.
Right.
And then also, I'm hearing reports from readers and other thought leaders in the pharmacy profession that, there are some issues with people getting full-time jobs out there. Kroger laid off some people a little while ago. CVS, Walgreens are in some locations trying to give people part-time hours instead of full-time hours. So being a pharmacist is not necessarily the slam dunk financially that it has been for the past 20, 30 years. And so that also requires kind of a different mindset into how do you deal with debt and make your family financially secure.
Absolutely. And I completely agree with that. You actually wrote an article called about the pharmacy school explosion. And that has to do a lot with what you were just saying now, that before pharmacy school was, or the profession of pharmacy was thought to be, one of those up there jobs. And now pharmacists are struggling to find jobs or to get the full-time, the benefits. There's so many schools. You wrote that there was 138 schools in the United States. And that's a crazy number. And as a future pharmacist, that terrifies me, because you're coming out with a 6-figure debt and you don't know if you're going to land a job. So you're pretty much settling for whatever comes. That's so terrifying when we talk about money, when you're saying not a lot of people look at their debt. And I was one of those people. You said 166,000. I'm third year and I've already surpassed that. I think I'm like 20 grand over that. So that goes to show you, and I'm somebody that looks at it monthly. My friends say that sometimes I'm obsessing over it, but I was taking the plus loan before because I thought I needed to supplement, my income, and I needed to help around at the house. And it was just because I didn't have the guidance to try and limit myself to the bare minimum. I feel like that's what a lot of students lack. They think that this is free money, and I'm to blame too. I've taken vacations with my student loan money, not knowing what the consequences were, not knowing how the interest was gonna, increase my amount. It's insane.
Yeah, it's pretty scary, right? and I did confirm that it is about 166,000 is what they're reporting, and actually 85% of pharmacists are reporting debt, and the debt is a little bit split between if you went to a public school or if you went to a private school. So consider this: if you go to a public school for pharmacy school, you might come out with an average of about 137,000. But if you go to a private school, you might come out with an average of 193,000. Yeah, and that's the self-reported average. And so what I really have been seeing is averages more like 250 to 300,000 for private schools. Oftentimes there will be some prerequisites that you'll have to take. Some of these programs will do like a sort of a pre-pharmacy school kind of curriculum that you'll have to do, and you'll take out undergraduate loans for that. So I recently had a case that was really kind of heartbreaking, where the father was kind of a first generation immigrant to the United States. Came here because it's the land of opportunity, right? And he had 200,000 of Parent Plus loans, and then then that was for all the prereqs that he did, the son did at the pharmacy school, and then the son had about 220,000 of pharmacy school loans too in his own name. So combined, that pharmacy school education was like a $400-something thousand debt burden, and this is for a degree that if he wants to live in a urban area where there's lots of pharmacists, so the supply of labor is plentiful, that he might struggle to get those full-time hours. And then how are you supposed to pay back a $400,000 debt burden making $100,000 a year? It's just really not possible if you want to live any kind of lifestyle at all, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And do you, well, before we start that, can you tell us a little bit about Student Loan Planner and what services you guys offer?
Sure. Our main service is helping people figure out exactly what we think that they should do with their debt so they can save the most money possible and get to debt freedom as fast as possible. So basically, we have on studentloanplanner.com, we've got a link for refinancing bonuses where people can click on, and they can click on a bunch of different links to get anywhere from $200 to $1,000 cash back if they refinance their student loans and find a lower interest rate. So that's part of our business, and that's actually free to use. There's no charge for that. We don't really, that's not really like a paid thing. And people, if they only have $100,000 of private of student loans, they know they need to do a private refinancing for to get a lower interest rate, then people can do that on our website for free. The people that are hiring us to make the plans are people that are kind of unsure or uncertain about what they should do. Like people that go to private schools or have a really high debt burden. Maybe they went to an out-of-state pharmacy school and maybe they owe, $200,000 or more is the most common type of consult that we get. A lot of times we'll get people with a low six-figure balance, like 100-something thousand too, that want to talk to us. But in general, the reason to book the student loan plan service that we offer is if you're really unsure of what path you should take, because there's three big paths. You can go for the public service loan forgiveness program. If you're working in a not-for-profit employer, you can refinance because the government gives you like 6 to 8% loans that can be refinanced to maybe 4 to 5%. So you can save money if you can afford the payments. And then that third path is paying based off your income for 20 to 25 years and then having to pay taxes on that forgiven balance at the end of those 20 to 25 years. So those are the three big paths. And if that sounded like, I don't know, if that sounded like a foreign language class to you when I was describing that, then you probably do need to hire us for the student loan plan.
To be honest, I feel like everyone should hire your services. I posted online kind of a little survey to see kind of where people stood with regards to loan information, and nobody knew what questions to ask because nobody knows anything.
That's scary.
Yeah, it's scary. You fill out the application, they send you the money, and you go on with your merry way, and then you're faced with this loan servicer who tells you how much you have to pay. And that's one thing that a lot of people don't know. And a lot of people are uncertain about. Once you finish graduation, you have to decide which way to go. Do you recommend that they go to you before they graduate to kind of get that plan on the road and ready as soon as their servicer contacts them? Or do they wait after the deferment period? What do you suggest in that situation?
Sure. I think that the best time to contact us is right after you graduate or right before you graduate. I mean, that's when we can save you the most money. While you're in school, there's honestly not a whole lot that we can really do for you because, the biggest impact that's going to happen with your student loans, Haley, is not that vacation that you took that you put on student loans and that was like a $3,000 extra borrowing that you needed.
Right.
Like that's not really going to alter your strategy any. What's altering the strategy is the fact that you're going to have, $40,000 of tuition that you're going to have to pay this year, you know? So that's the big driver. So for that reason, I kind of like the idea of people like just educating themselves gradually if they're still in school, focusing on their studies, focusing on getting out of school and finishing, because that's the most important thing is that you finish,
Absolutely.
you actually get a degree, and I've had some people that haven't, and that's the real not good situation. So you want to get the degree and finish, and then once you finish getting that degree, that's when we can really help you a lot. So if you're, a brand new grad or you have been out of school for even a few years, we actually even have sometimes people reach out to us that have been out of school for 10 years or more because, maybe they put their loans into for a bunch of forbearance and deferment and the interest grew and now they're barely paying their interest and they're not even watching it fall at all. And it's very stressful. So, the last thing that I would say is we're actually beta testing right now a pre-pharmacy school consult to kind of help people decide whether or not they should go to pharmacy school based off of the debt projection that we can make for whatever school that they're going to attend. So that's, kind of very early stages. People can reach out to us on our website. We have a contact button on the bottom right-hand corner. You can click that and reach out to us if that sounded really interesting to you. But if you're already in school, the best thing to do is kind of read our free content and just probably hire us when you graduate.
Perfect. And we have a follower on Instagram at Finding Pharmacy. She wants to know, Travis, is it better to start paying off my interest now that I'm in school, or should I wait till I graduate?
So it depends on your situation. So for example, if you want to be working at a community pharmacy or a not-for-profit kind of employer like a hospital pharmacy, then paying down your interest could be the worst thing you could possibly do. Because if you're going to go for public service loan forgiveness, you have to pay based on your income for 10 years. So you'll sign up for one of these income-based repayment programs, kind of like the pay-as-you-earn or the revised pay-as-you-earn programs. Those are the two most commonly used. And so if you're going to make those payments and you're going to have a balance that's forgiven at the end of the 10 years, then if you pay any interest while you're in school, all you did was throw money away. Right?
Yeah, absolutely.
So that would be a terrible decision there if she thinks that she might want to do a not-for-profit kind of career as a pharmacist. If she is saying, you know what, I'm positive that I want to do retail, or I want to do part-time, or something where I'm not necessarily always going to be a full-time employee, or I'm going to have a different kind of a career path. Maybe even you're going to work in the corporate world too. That's another option. So if you're going to make kind of a decent income in the private sector, the question that I would have for her is, how much is she going to graduate with relative to her income? So if you're going to graduate with $300,000 and $130,000 of income, then the amount that you owe divided by your income that you're expecting is actually more than 2. That's called your debt to income ratio.
Right.
So if your debt to income ratio is over 2, then that would suggest that you might be a good candidate for that loan forgiveness 20 to 25 year strategy where you're paying that tax bomb at the end of those couple decades of payments. And in that case, it's also a bad idea to pay extra on her interest while she's in school. Now, if she had $150,000 of debt and she had some interest on her loans, and she was working part-time somehow and had a little bit extra money, and she has no credit card debt, and she's not thinking about going out and buying an expensive car with the car loan. I mean, if she's got a really sound financial picture and her expectation is that she's going to go work for industry, or she's going to go work for CVS or Walgreens after graduation, then I would say that's okay. Yeah, go ahead and make some payments on your loans to get it a little bit lower so that you can, when you start having to pay it back, you'll have to pay back less. But the problem that I see a lot of times is people will make payments on their loans without any strategy at all. Right. And that a lot of times is like literally taking a lighter to $100 bills and just lighting it on fire.
And that's the problem with not knowing and not being informed. And I'm so glad that we're doing the show for our student listeners and our pharmacist listeners. I'm part of a Facebook group. It's called Pharmacist Moms. And one of the members was posting that she recently was laid off. Like you were talking, a bunch of companies were doing layoffs, and she'd been with this company for 20 years. So what do you say to pharmacists in this situation where they've already been out of school for 20 years? They've already had their repayment plan set. Can they change that plan at any point, or do they have to stick to what they decided once they graduated?
You can change your plan at any point if you have loans that are eligible to be changed. So for somebody who's been paying for a very long time, it's going to be very complicated because she might have loans from the program that existed before the direct loan program, which is called the FFEL loan program. This program existed prior to 2010. And so if somebody has never consolidated or never altered the form of their loans, that these FFEL loans could be very, very different from what you would have access to, Haley, graduating in a couple years or so. So that's just a very, it's a different kind of an animal. So, for her loans, if she's got a whole bunch of debt, it could actually make sense to do a consolidation in some cases. But the problem is if she consolidated, she would lose all of the payment credit that she's already made on those loans if they did qualify for something like IBR, income-based repayment. So for her, I guess I would just say that she needs to be very careful and try to get it on some sort of income-based repayment program because, that way at least her interest won't capitalize on her too badly while she's trying to find another job. She'll also, at least have the loans not on forbearance, which is good to not have your loans in forbearance or deferment unless you absolutely have to. And she'll also be able to get a low monthly payment because her income changed. So, I think the thing that I'm kind of wondering about with the number of pharmacy schools that it's out there now is, what does the future of the profession look like, right? Yeah. So, I think a lot of pharmacists will still find jobs doing the core function of what the degree is supposed to be about, but you might have to get more creative with your job search in the future. You might have to say, well, I'm going to be way better at doing medical sales than, somebody without a PharmD degree, and so maybe that might be a career path that some pharmacists will have to kind of pursue instead of the traditional route, in bigger numbers. I mean, it's kind of like law school. Law school went through the scandals in the Great Recession because you had all of these lawyers that couldn't find jobs, and so the percentage of lawyers that were doing work where their degree was a required, it required a legal education, the percentage of the overall makeup of JD degree holders that were doing a job that required their degree was really declined a lot. And so some of the kind of shadier schools got shut down and are being shut down right now because of that crunch that happened to the legal profession in the Great Recession. So one thing that I'm wondering about the pharmacy world, and I'd love your thoughts on this too, but is just what's going to happen in the future. Will we ever be in a situation where, the struggle for pharmacists is, not getting just part-time hours or having to change their career trajectories, but maybe not being able to get jobs like in the legal world. So I don't know if you had any thoughts on that, Haley.
To be honest, it's just terrifying. And I can say that at least living in South Florida, I've seen the opening of new schools, and it's scary. It's scary because nobody knows. It's the bubble that you mentioned, and it could blow at any time. The same thing can happen with the lawyers that couldn't find jobs. And the only thing I can think of being, a mother and a household member that needs to supply money. How do you do it? How do you go to school for this degree that you're expecting to make X amount of money? You're counting on that. And then you might have to end up, settling for a part-time position or even finding another job that has nothing to do with what you went to school for. And right. I listen to the Dave Ramsey show. You mentioned him earlier. And I hear people call in all the time where they have $200,000 in student loans. And it's not even from, a doctorate, or it's not even for what they're practicing. And that terrifies me. And I think that not having a cap, and I honestly don't even know how it's legal, that there's no cap on how much student loan a student can take out is asinine. I think it's terrifying, and you must see it with all of the consulting that you do, people who are genuinely afraid, to be in debt and not knowing how to get out of it.
Well, so for the person that you mentioned, the mom with that got laid off, that might feel like her world is crashing down around her. I mean, I do like to put things in perspective. Like, this is, at the very worst, this is a problem that can be managed.
Right.
And so, for example, for her, she's got a pharmacy degree. I have to believe that she would be able to get a job doing something else that at least involves, science oriented subjects, right?
Right.
So, I mean, she's got all this chemistry, all this knowledge from having to prepare for pharmacy school, getting, a bachelor's degree and then going to pharmacy school. So, I mean, she's got a lot of education. So the very, very worst case scenario is that, maybe she's going to work, as a teacher or something. I mean, and that's not great compared to, you're making, 50,000 or 40,000 a year versus, 110. Yeah, that's not good. But, that is a far cry from being out in the street because, right. You're a low skilled worker that makes 20,000 a year and your job got outsourced and you don't have any more options anymore. Right.
Absolutely.
So, I mean, at the very least, that person's life is not wrecked. I mean, it's something that's going to be really painful. So, like, maybe she's going to have to sell her cars. Maybe she's going to have to not have her kids go to the same school that they were going to. Yeah. Maybe she's going to have to downsize her house. But the good news is she's still going to be able to retire. She's still going to be able to send her kids to college. She's still going to be able to live a very comfortable life with, trips to different places. Maybe not to Paris, but maybe, she's taking her kids to, national parks instead,
Gotcha.
So, I mean, it's like one of those things where even in that terrible scenario that you mentioned, there's always options. And so sometimes like some of the fear that sets in is very natural. And so I try to turn it around to like show people what is possible in their lives instead of letting them be depressed. Like I show them how actually you have so much potential in your life, even in the worst situation, because of the fact that you did get, an education. You are in a position where you know a lot and you're not, somebody without skills. And so it's just basically, in the, kind of a corporate world, you have to be nimble, right? You have to be ready to move from one industry to the next. If one industry kind of gets too many workers or it gets not as attractive anymore. So I think that, pharmacists aren't going to have that stability like they did in the past. One thing that's interesting with all these new schools is you mentioned that there's no cap for borrowing. So in 2006, they took off any cap for graduate school borrowing. They made it unlimited. And schools gradually figured this out. And so when, the Great Recession happened and other forms of credit seized up, the federal government took over federal student loans completely. And so now the only lender for federal student loans is the federal government. And so, so now there's like no underwriting standards either. And so these schools obviously realized, wait a second, if we can fill the seats with students, then we are going to get lots and lots of money, right? Because, pharmacy school is a lot cheaper to run than, some schools. It's not as cheap as maybe a law school is, but it's certainly a big source of making lots of profit for the university. And so, you've got these universities that are looking at their pharmacy schools as sources of massive profit. And so one of the scary things is the private schools are enrolling a disproportionate share of the graduates because they're the ones that are trying to make the biggest profits. Whereas, your kind of public schools tend to be, I guess, a little bit lower cost, a little bit more concerned about what the cost of education is. And so, yeah, I mean, I think in some cases it's just absolutely abject greed where the schools realize that they can get people enrolled and, let's do it. For example, I talked to one pharmacist recently who talked about the rise of early enrollment at pharmacy schools. And basically what they're trying to get you to do is commit to early enrollment so that you don't apply somewhere else, so that you don't start a bidding war for merit scholarships against another institution. So they're very desperate to get people in the seats. And if you have really good scores where you'll make their pharmacy school look really good, if you go there, then you can probably start a bidding war on getting a lower tuition cost with better merit scholarships or a discounted tuition rate, if you will. And so, but what they try to do at the early admission is prevent you from ever doing that. By committing early, now you're not going to be going and asking for, an extra $10,000 a year scholarship because some other place offered you a better deal.
Right. And, I didn't even know that was possible, the bidding war between schools. I feel like barely any students know about this. It's like a well-kept secret schools don't want you to know about. And I also, I wonder, I hear these things of different schools where if you don't pass a class, you're not offered a remedial, so you have to repay the year. And then, you talking about this just gets me thinking, like, is this just something they're doing for profit? Are they holding students back and not offering them a summer remake course or something like that just to charge the tuition again?
Absolutely. I mean, so I actually think that, so, remember I worked in like kind of the Wall Street world.
Right.
I actually think that there's university professors and deans out there that kind of make some of the people I worked with in Wall Street look generous.
Wow.
So, I mean, obviously there's a lot of people out there that are good people, that they care about students. They're trying to do their best. A lot of the professors that you run into, they don't have any control over what the school's doing.
Right, right.
I mean, they're just trying to teach you, do a good job, help you make sure that you got the right knowledge to go out in the world and help people. I mean, the vast majority of people at these schools are good people that are, even the ones that are popping up that are new schools, they care about people. But the problem is the people that are making the decisions,
might not.
Yeah, they might not be that generous, right? They might not be that altruistic. At the end of the day, the bigger their university, the more money they make.
Absolutely.
Like, a university is the compensation and bonus package for their top people is based off of how much revenue the school is bringing in, how profitable it is. And so, any kind of private school with that kind of incentive structure, your top people might be making a massive amount of money with a very kind of, frankly, cushy lifestyle compared to what you might have to do in the private sector. And all you got to do is just keep the flow of grads going and keep tuition high and convince people that now is the best time in the history of the pharmacy profession, right? That's one thing that I hear across the board is like all these people in different fields, they'll tell me stuff like they went to orientation and, the dean comes in and they say, this is the best time in history for pharmacists, or this is the best time in history for dentists or lawyers or doctors or physicians. I mean, whatever the field is. And it's kind of designed to like paint the picture, show you the lifestyle, like kind of make you want it. And so I guess like what I would say is think about this. What if you could do a part-time job and make 60 or 70,000 a year working 20 hours a week? And what if your student loans could be handled in such a way where you would pay like $400 a month for your student loans and put away maybe a couple $100 a month for your future tax penalties, and then you could just invest for retirement and just spend it and enjoy life on the rest. So actually, as crazy as our student loan rules are, they actually do make for some really unique opportunities for people who are willing to be frugal with their lifestyle. So if you could tell me that, I was going to have to pay $500 to $700 a month out of my $70,000 earnings, or let's say $60,000 earnings to keep it more realistic. So I'm going to earn $60,000. I'm going to lose about, I don't know, eight or 9,000 of that to student loan payments on these income-driven programs, and so I'm going to be left with like 50 something. So if I would be given the option of working part-time and earning $50,000 a year in pre-tax salary, helping people doing interesting work, I mean, that doesn't sound too bad.
No, and it's an option that I think many people don't know exists.
Yeah, and so the key there is you have to make sure that your strategy is set up in such a way with your loans that that's a reality, that's a possibility. And so a lot of people don't do that. They put lots of pressure on themselves. They try to pay all their loans back. They try to pay a little bit more than the interest, but they're not really making a lot of progress. Like they just make a lot of mistakes. So if somebody wants to be part-time, they can be part-time, even if they have $300,000 from a private school. If they want to go work in a hospital-based setting, you can get a lot of your loans forgiven that way. That's a great path to go down if you have a lot of student debt. If you want to work full-time and you love the idea of being debt-free, you can do that. You can go to a place and refinance your student loans to get a lower interest rate, and you can refinance multiple times and pick up multiple cashback bonuses. And you can pay it down to zero, and then you can have that degree where you've got, a six-figure income for the rest of your life as long as you want it, and you'll have no debt. So there are very positive things about the pharmacy profession. It's definitely not all negative. It's kind of like anything where, what was a 100% positive, like this is the best field in the world kind of a scenario, because they did that, they published that study that basically said that, all the boomers are going to get old, right? And so they're going to have all these pharmacists that they're going to need. And if they don't have the pharmacists, then the world's going to blow up. So you're going to have massive job growth in pharmacy, and you're going to have, this huge salary growth for pharmacists because there's going to be a shortage. And then, fast forward into the future, and then the shortage is more than being met.
Right.
Especially in certain parts of the country, you could probably still move to rural West Virginia and still make some really great money and have a lot of room to negotiate your salary. But yeah, if you want to be in, downtown Miami, like you might have a hard time. And so, it's just kind of a brave new world for pharmacy out there, Haley?
Absolutely. And I think it's really important with everything you've said, just to tell everyone, having a plan is so important. It's so important to know what you're going to do and how you're going to tackle this mountain, because it's a mountain. No matter which way you look at it, it's a mountain of debt. And of so many options out there, that us normal people don't, And I want to ask you now about cost, because I know everyone listening, is very on board about having a plan and they want to know what to do with their loans. How much does it cost to have a personalized plan created with you guys?
Sure. So if you owe less than $200,000 in household debt, so anyone, your spouse, like combined, it's like less than $200,000, then that costs $295. It's a one-time flat fee. we prepare the plan, we get you on the phone for an hour, you schedule a call, and we talk through all of your options and find the best one. And so if you owe $200,000 to $400,000 of household debt, then the fee is for $449, one-time flat fee. And same thing. We get you on the phone. We go through the options. It's a little bit more complex because you have more debt. And then if you owe more than $400,000 of household debt, then that would be, for example, like you maybe are married to another pharmacist that also went to a private program, and so you both have a ton of debt. Then it's $595 one-time fee, and then you would work with me directly. So I have kind of transitioned as the business has grown to really handling the very high, most complex cases. And so that's why, I charge a lot more for that because the savings are usually a lot greater as well. So it's $595 basically to work with me. And then one of my team members, Rob, usually handles the $200,000 to $400,000 loans, and Lauren handles the $0 to $200,000 loans. And so that way we're kind of able to give a really great price to the people who might just have $150,000, just want a few questions answered, but we're also able to serve, that really high debt segment that could make or break their lives by like their student loan plan,
Absolutely.
And so like the average savings that we're finding, the projected savings, and these are over the lifetime of someone's repayment. So this is not like immediate savings, but this is, spread out over a 20-year time frame over the usually is $57,000. So
Wow.
the average client that works with us, over a 20-year, 25-year period, we're finding projected savings of about $57,000 by altering what they're currently doing. So that's not counting the people who are already on the right path. Like we put in, zero for those clients in terms of how much we saved them. And, that's why we charge a transparent flat fee instead of a contingency fee. Like we're not interested in charging, 1 to 10% of our savings, projected savings or something like that. It's just a one-time flat fee. We charge for our time. In 90% of cases, we find people projected savings of 5 figures or more. Sometimes it's a lot more. I had a pharmacist friend of mine who was on the standard plan, was working at a qualifying hospital for PSLF. He was paying $2,000 a month. Instead of paying $2,000 a month, he was actually supposed to be paying $700 a month.
Wow.
So if you project that out over his lifetime of his loan repayment, he was going to save about $130,000. So, sometimes it's a lot of savings if you're on a really bad plan. And if you're just kind of on a modestly bad plan, it's usually, like I said, some low 5-figure amount if you're doing most of the things the right way. So I think, probably everybody that has more than 100,000 could benefit from getting a plan. So the link for that is studentloanplanner.com/pharmacy podcast. Make sure to go there to read more about it. And I think that if you have a small amount of debt relative to your income, you need to refinance. We're not trying to, take money from you without adding tons of value. So if that's you don't necessarily need to hire us for making a plan. You can just go to studentloanplanner.com, click on the refinancing bonuses link in the menu bar, and then just apply a bunch of different lenders and get, a few $100 and a lower interest rate and get out of debt sooner. So everything we do is focused on student loans, focused on pharmacists, focused on trying to get you out of debt as fast as possible. And also I think it's important to tell people that, we're not trying to sell you financial advising. We're not trying to sell you disability insurance or term life insurance or something like that. We don't have a recurring, $300 a month financial planning thing that we want you to sign up for. All we do is student loans. The fees that I mentioned are our only fees. So, it's not like we have some sort of like hidden agenda. Like that's all we do is just fix people's student loans. And we serve, like I said, I think 1,200 people at this point. So we're basically doing a volume-based approach so we can offer tremendous value.
That's perfect. Pharmacists are considered medication experts, and it's now time that we let student loan repayment experts guide us on the path to becoming debt-free. And I'm going to say that again. The link is studentloanplanner.com/pharmacy podcast. Travis, thank you so much for joining us today. And for everyone listening, take advantage of the great services offered by Student Loan Planner. This is something that we all need. even if it's just to get an idea of what path we want to take. Again, that's studentloanplanner.com/pharmacy podcast. Travis, thank you so much. Follow us on Facebook and Instagram at Pharmacy Future Leaders and on Twitter at Leaders Pharmacy for updates on the show.
Thanks so much, Haley. Have a great day.
The mission of the Pharmacy Future Leaders podcast is to support all pharmacy students by providing advice, direction, stories, and sharing with each other.
Be sure to use the hashtag Pharmacy Future Leaders on all social media. We thank you for listening to our podcast. Please send us an email if you're interested in being on the show. Send your message to pharmacyfutureleaders@gmail.com.
Just remember, never give up, stay positive, eat healthy, get your sleep, and know why you wanted to be a pharmacist from the beginning, to help others live healthier lives.
We are Pharmacy Future Leaders.